Hey nerds, welcome back to Supergirl Theories and Conspiracies. I'm your host Brian from Good Nerd Bad Nerd. This week we saw Supergirl return after its mid-season hiatus. It wasn't very long, but it's back, it's picking up right where it left off, and we got answers to a bunch of the questions. So just jumping right in, first dealing with Kat figuring out who Supergirl is, we had John, once he was rescued, Hank, pretending to be Supergirl, shape-shifting and coming in, and so we got that little scene at the very end. Now, this is something that happens in comics all the time. Actually, in the Superman series where he's allegedly killed by Doomsday, obviously Clark Kent disappeared at the same time. So in order to convince the world they're not the same person because they disappeared at the same time and showed up again at the same time, Supergirl, who at that time, the Supergirl in the comics was a shapeshifter, she pretended to be Superman so Clark Kent could be there, and there's a scene that's Lois Lane hugging both Superman and Clark Kent. So, you know, this kind of shapeshifter standing in for people or people in costume, that's very common in the comics. Next, we got to see the Phantom Zone projector, or at least this version of it. The Phantom Zone projector is one of the more common ways used in the comics and in the cartoons for Superman and others to interact with the Phantom Zone. We see in the cartoon, it's how he finds out about Zod and, you know, other Kryptonians in the Phantom Zone. And we clearly see it here being used to send Astra and her people there. So it'll be interesting to see if we get any more Phantom Zone stuff, or if it was just a nice shout out to the technology that was used most often in the comics. Now, the two big Easter eggs or things in the show that I think the show's building to that we saw this week. The first is called the Last Line Squad. Now, in the comics, this is a squad that was set up by Amanda Waller specifically for battling Superman in case he went rogue. Now, there's a couple possibilities for who this team could be. It's possible that Maxwell Lord is building an army. I mean, his security force clearly had some pretty advanced weapons, so that he's building them as a defense against Kryptonians, because he's made it abundantly clear he does not trust Supergirl, he does not trust Superman, he doesn't trust anyone. He's studying them, learning their weaknesses in order to fight against them. And it's a very real possibility that he has that fear of them turning against him and turning against the country. The other possibility is General Lane is creating this kind of last line squad. We know he's developing weapons specifically against Kryptonians, and it wouldn't be that far-fetched for him to be putting together a specialized team. Or the possibility is they're working together. So there was definitely some allusions to the last line squad. In the comics, they have power armor and they have kryptonite-powered weapons. And we already know that there are kryptonite-powered weapons in the show. We've seen Hank's kryptonite-powered knife, and they have kryptonite-powered ammo. So this is a very possibility that we're going to see some version of this in the show. Now, the last thing calls out to Maxwell Lord's secret project that's in that room that had the number 52, which of course is a shout-out to the new 52. And in this room, he's got a scan of the cyborg's arm, Red Tornado's arm. He's got this woman who has got all black eyes and really pale skin. And this most likely is going to be a version of Bizarro. Now, we already know Bizarro is coming to the show. This was announced. And this most likely seems like what Maxwell Lord is doing. So there's two options here. One, in the comics, there is a Bizarro Supergirl. She isn't very long-lived, and it's kind of a it's a weird story. Baby Buster, who's actually the child of Bizarro Lois Lane and Bizarro Superman, accidentally turns on the duplicator ray and hits Supergirl with it, and this causes Bizarro Supergirl to be made, and Bizarro Supergirl is like infatuated with Baby Buster, and there's almost a war between Earth and the Bizarro Earth. I can't even pronounce how they say it, but Superman stops her with some blue kryptonite, which is, a weakness of the Bizarros. And then Supergirl, not wanting to give up on Baby Buster, accidentally kills herself with blue kryptonite. She, blunders into some and it kills her. So that's clearly not the way they're going, but it's important just to know that backstory. Now, they are most likely taking origins from the original Bizarro. And by I say original, I mean the main Bizarro. In most cases, he is a clone of Superman that Lex Luthor has been trying to create. This is going to be most likely from the post-crisis origin. Maxwell Lord here is clearly the Lex Luthor character, and so he's trying to create his own Supergirl, whether it's a clone or in this case it looks like some sort of biotech combination. There's a lot going on there. An interesting side note, the first Bizarro, when Superman was fighting him, he would crumble into dust, and that dust actually restored the sight to Lucy Lane, Lois's sister, Lucy, who's on the show. She lost her sight in a conflict when some acid got thrown in her face, and the dust from Bizarro actually restored it. So in the final fight, when Superman destroys Bizarro and he kind of crumbles to dust, all of that kind of conveniently falls on Lucy Lane, and she gets her eyesight back. So that's an interesting thing. Lucy hasn't lost her eyesight that I'm aware of yet in the show, so it's possible she could get really injured coming up, but that seems unlikely that they'll put that in. It's just a nice connection. It is also, in the New 52, just to give this version, Bizarro is also a clone made by Lex Luthor, but he's killed when there's an invasion from Earth 3, and this is the crime syndicate. Now, this is a long shot, but it ties into those Flash Supergirl crossovers, but if there is going to be some sort of crossover, really long shot, maybe Bizarro Supergirl steps in to try and help per Maxwell Lord's orders, and she gets killed because the crime syndicate from Earth 3 is responsible for the death of that Bizarro. So a lot going on there. It'll be interesting to see what exactly is happening and what happens with this mystery character who we're just going to call Bizarro Supergirl from this point on. So let me know what you guys think. What do you think is going on? Which origin for Bizarro do you want Bizarro Supergirl to have? And what do you think of the Last Line Squad? Or do you think this is going to be just an, both Lord and Lane having their own little hit squads? Let me know what you guys think, and stay tuned for more Supergirl theories and conspiracies.